Guys, just to continue on from our last video, I didn't show you guys exactly how to save your work, and of course you want to constantly save your work. And so here's the part that we created in the last video. I'm going to show you how to save it, and then I'm going to take you through a few other key ideas and features and things that you can do in Fusion 360. And we'll go from there in terms of preparing us for the creating the fidget spinner. Okay, so let's start by saving our work. All right, so right now it's unsaved. Okay, so I'm going to hit the save button here in the top left corner, and I can call it just our test part. Okay, and the location. Now, I showed you guys how to create a new project at the beginning of the last video, and so that's where I'm going to save this part here. Is I'm going to save it in test project, and all of your projects will show up here if you click on this down arrow button. In case you didn't want to save it in that location, you can save it into another location. But I'm good with saving it in the test project folder. So I'm just going to hit save, and you'll see now that it will be called test part version 0. So from here on in, as I continue to save it, it's going to save it as test part version 0, then version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4, and so on and so on. Okay, and I'll show you that towards the end as well, how to save it as a different version. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take us back and show you how our history timeline is down here in the bottom left corner, where if we wanted to edit anything that we did in the past and maybe kind of totally change a dimension on something from our original sketch, these are all the things that we did to our part. So if you recall in the last video, the last thing we did was the chamfer to these holes here. We did a fillet around the edges of the part. I extruded the part, and I started with an original sketch. Okay, so I'm going to right click the original sketch, and I'm going to say edit sketch. I could have also edited the sketch up here in sketch 1. Notice if I turn on my light bulb there, you can see the sketch underneath. If I turn off the light bulb, the sketch disappears. But I can also right click and edit sketch from there as well. Okay, so I'm going to right click, edit sketch. Okay, so what I want to show you guys now is that you do not have to create these holes in the sketch. I could have extruded the part first and then created the holes. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete that hole, and let's delete that hole. Okay, and we don't need this construction line right now. Let's delete that as well. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and extrude this part, but before I do that, I do want to show you guys one thing that I didn't show you in the last video, and that is this section here underneath constraints. Okay, this is an important part of Fusion 360, and understanding this is very important. Is you can add all of these constraints to different parts that you create, and what that's going to do is it's going to create a relationship between them. Okay, and what I mean by that is, like, if I were to draw this circle, so let's draw a circle here. I'll draw it in a random spot right now. Okay, I will dimension, so I press D on my keyboard. I'll dimension it again as 15. Okay, and the location I will do, let's call it 17.5. And let's call it from here to here, let's just do 20 from there. Okay, so there's my hole again. Now watch this. When I create another circle, so I'm going to press C on my keyboard, I'm just going to put it in a random spot. Okay, press D, and I'm still going to give it a dimension of 15 millimeters. Okay, but watch this now. Watch how I can create a relationship between these two circles. Okay, watch. So I am going to click on or choose a horizontal vertical constraint. What that's going to do is that's going to create a relationship between these two circles that they always have to stay on the same horizontal line as each other. Okay, watch this. So if I go to press horizontal vertical, okay, choose this circle, choose the center of this circle, and you see that that circle snaps into position so that it is in a relationship with this other circle. Wherever this circle goes, this circle will stay horizontal with it. All right, let me show you. Okay, so if I press D for dimension and I double click this dimension to edit the dimension, so I'll change that to 12. Okay, when I hit enter, not only is it going to change this circle, but this circle is going to move along with it because I created that constraint between the two. I created that relationship that they have to be horizontal. So you press enter and you see it moved with it. Okay, so that circle moved with it. That's something that I didn't show you in the last video that I think is pretty important. And you can see there's all kinds of different constraints. We're not going to really need to use a whole ton of them, but you can see that there's a constraint for concentric circles, so circles that need to start at the same center point. This tangent, the tangent constraint gets pretty important when we're doing the fidget spinner, and I'll show you guys once we get to the fidget spinner how we can use that tangent constraint. Okay, perpendicular constraint, parallel constraint, that means that if I choose this, then that means two lines will always have to be parallel to each other. So if I move one, the other one has to move with it, or if I move the angle of one, the other line, the angle of it also has to move. Okay, same thing with perpendicular. It means that they have to stay 90 degrees from each other. Okay, so this constraint section is pretty important part of Fusion 360 because it helps us create relationships so we don't have to, if we make a change to one thing, we don't necessarily have to make a change to everything if we create these relationships between them. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete these circles now and do what I said I was going to do earlier, and that was extrude this block and then create the holes once it's already 3D. All right, so I'm going to, if you remember from the last video, to extrude, okay, you just press E on your keyboard or you go to create, extrude. Okay, but I'm just going to press E on my keyboard, and there it is. I can choose how much to extrude this part, so let's go with 25 millimeters. There it goes. Now, notice here, you could do 25 in one direction. I can also do two-sided, okay, so that it does 25 in both directions, okay. But I'm just going to stick with one-sided right now. Okay, press OK. Oh. Let's go back. And press E. Okay, seems to be picking up on an error from a chamfer that I had made before. So here's what we're going to do. Okay, no problem. Just because I want to show you this new part or this new feature, we don't really need any of that stuff. I'm just going to create a brand new rectangle. No problem. Okay, and I'm going to dimension it to be 50, yeah, let's go with 100 wide again. And let's go with, okay, 40 for my length. Okay, so now I'm going to hit extrude, press E on my keyboard. Okay, and now let's try doing the 25. Okay. Still seems to be picking up on previous things that I did. Okay, so no problem. It's okay. Let's just go to File. Let's go to a new design entirely. It's okay because I can show you how to do this from scratch again. So remember, we're going to go to Create Sketch to do this from scratch. Choose a plane. Okay. Zoom in a little bit. Press R to choose a rectangle. Okay, and now let's do it 40 tall by 100 wide. Okay. Okay, here we go. Press enter, and we're in. Okay. Okay, so once again, let's press E on the keyboard. Let's change to my home view here in the top right corner. And now let's choose the 25. Okay, so there's my block. And now what I want to show you is that now I can put those circles in. All right, and here's how you do it. Is you press, again, new sketch, and it's going to ask you what plane do you want to draw this sketch on. Do you want to draw it on either of these three planes? But we can, not only that, but we can also draw on any of the faces that I've created. All right, now since I want to put the holes on top of this face, I'm going to actually, instead of selecting one of the planes, I'm going to actually select this face here. I'm going to click on this face, and that's going to open a sketch on this face. Okay, let's just pan over. Okay, and so now I will create a circle on this face. Okay, so this is, I'm doing this to my 3D part, but I'm creating a new sketch on my 3D part. So I'm going to press C for circle. And let's do a circle at dimension D. Again, let's do the 15 millimeter circle. Let's do this halfway, which is 20. So let's do 20 millimeter spacing from the center of this circle to the top of that, or to this edge here. Okay, and then the distance from here to this edge, let's do it at 20. Okay, so I've fully constrained. You can see that this circle has turned black. I have fully constrained this circle. Okay, now we can do the mirror line again like we did the last time, or I can draw a circle anywhere on this side and give it a horizontal vertical constraint like I had just explained. Okay, so the horizontal vertical constraint, which is right here. So let's do a circle. Draw it anywhere. Okay, and dimension D, 15 millimeters again. Okay, and this time I'm now going to click on horizontal vertical constraint, and now select the center of this circle and the center of this circle. Okay, that's going to constrain it. But you can see that this circle is, I still need to tell it how far away to be from this edge, because you can see this one is further. So just press D, press the center of this circle and that edge. And we're going to make it the same thing as the other side, 20. Now notice this went black, this circle went black. Without giving it this dimension here, I didn't tell it how far to be from the center here to this edge. I didn't have to tell it because I constrained it with this circle. So wherever this circle is, okay, this circle is going to line up with it horizontally. So I don't need to make that dimension for this circle to go black. It already knows that it's just going to take the dimension from this circle, okay, because they're always going to stay horizontal to each other. Okay, once you're done that, okay, you press escape to exit out of the dimension tool. And now just press E for extrude. Okay, and there you go. It's giving us the option of what we want to extrude. So right now we need to select the profiles that we want to extrude. I want this circle and I want this circle. So I clicked on both. Now I don't want to extrude them up. I want them to be a hole downwards. So I grab this arrow, grab it, hold my mouse button, and drag down. Okay. Notice that now it changes to negative 10 millimeter distance. Okay. If I went upwards, it would be positive 10. Okay. Now I can drag this all the way through, or I can simply come here and say, I want to go, see where it says extend? I want it to extend all the way through my part. Okay, all the way through my part. Press OK. And notice my operation is cut. It automatically will choose cut when I switch the arrow into the part. It will automatically switch to that. Okay, hit OK. And there's your holes just like I had before. Okay, just like I had before. Now, I do want to show you one last thing. Well, it's actually three things, but it comes from the same idea. And that is how to construct my own plane. So, you know when I click on Create New Sketch, I'm only given 3 choices of planes to choose from. Well, you can create your own. All right. For example, let's say I wanted to create a plane that started right in the middle of this part. Okay, so I wanted to draw something right in the middle of this part. All right, let's try that. Let's go to Construct, and I can choose a mid-plane. That's going to create a plane in the middle of my part. So let's choose that. Okay, and now what I need to do is when I choose that is I need to pick the ends of the part. So it wants to know, if I choose mid-plane, it wants to know the middle of what, right? So what I do is I choose this face, then I orbit around, and I choose this face. And once I click on this face, watch what happens. Look at how that plane just showed up in between those two faces. Press OK, and now I have a plane. So when I go to Create New Sketch, now I have these 3 planes plus all these faces to choose from, and now on top of that, I have a plane right in the middle of my part. So if I wanted to create a sketch in the middle, there it is. I am now drawing into the middle of my part. Okay, so let's say I drew, I guess I can draw another circle, and I'll start it here, right in the middle of my part. You know, I'll draw it, 10 millimeters, let's say, diameter. Okay. Notice it's already black because I selected it to be right in the middle of my part, right in the middle. So it knows exactly how far in and how far out from the side it needs to be because it's in the middle of my part. It's already fully constrained. Okay, watch what happens when I move my mouse over to this home button. See how you see the sketch inside the middle of my part. So now when I let's go to, let's go to my right side. Okay, so now if I choose to extrude this or cut a hole when I press E, right? Watch this. When I switch back to home, you can see it's going to create a hole inside of my part. So let's say I choose for it to go only 10 millimeters. Okay, it's going to cut. Press OK. Now, we can't see that hole, but it's there. And if you ever wanted to edit it, okay, go back to your history here. Do you see it in the bottom left corner? You can always go to right click, edit feature, and this will pop up again. So let's say I wanted to now drag this right through to the edge of my part here. Press OK. Now look, it created a hole right through my other hole, and I started it in the middle of this part. Okay, so that's a pretty powerful feature. Remember, like this, you can do some pretty complicated products, and there's times where you may need to create a mid-plane, right? There's times where you also may need to complete a plane that's on an angle, and that's what I'm going to speak about now, is we can construct a plane that is at an angle through this feature right here. So I'm going to delete what I have here. I'm going to delete this feature. In fact, I'm even going to delete this sketch. Okay, and what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to create a plane at an angle. Okay, well now it's asking at an angle from what? Like what line do I want to create this angle from? Well, I want to create, what I'm going to try to do, guys, is create a hole that goes through at an angle. Okay, so I'm going to choose this line right here. Okay, see, I'm hovering my mouse over it. I'm going to choose that line. And now what it's going to say is, okay, what angle do you want to go from that line? So I can rotate my wheel. Okay, I'm going to say that I want to do this at -45 because I'm going to draw my hole going through there. So it's going to create a plane that's on an angle of 45 degrees. Okay, so I'm going to press OK. And you can see I now have a plane that does that. Okay, let's go back home. Anytime you kind of get lost there, just click the home button and it will go back. Okay, let's rotate around a little bit. Okay, so let's create a sketch. And this time I'm going to select this plane right here. Okay. Here, let's just go back there. Oops. Accidentally undid my plane there. Let's just construct it again. Plane at an angle from this line, -45. Press OK. Let's create a sketch on this plane. Okay. So I'm now going to just create a circle. Let's pan down here. I'm going to create a circle. Okay, and I'm going to draw it, I don't know, let's say right there. Okay. Now what happens? Well, let's first give it some dimensions. Let's say that I want this to be 15 millimeters again. And I want it to, let's see here. I want it to be, no, I can't do that. I want it to be 20 millimeters off of there. Okay. And let's say 35 millimeters from there. Okay. Now I'm going to press extrude. I'm going to press extrude. Press E on my keyboard. Watch what happens now when I press home. Now watch that. See how my hole now, or my circle, is at a 45-degree angle. So when I switch to this side, okay, and I'm going to choose to go all the way through my part, and notice how it automatically changed to cut. Okay, I can now press OK, and it created a hole at a 45-degree angle. Okay, so if I rotate around, you can see that it created a hole on an angle. Okay, now I happen to go through this hole here, but that's okay. Okay, so far we have learned how to create a sketch on a face. So beyond the 3 planes that are by default, we can create a sketch on a 3D face. We can construct our own mid-plane or a plane at an angle. Okay, now the last thing I'm going to show you is how to create an offset plane. Okay, an offset plane. That's the last pretty powerful one that I'm going to show you, and we'll be good to go. All right, so I am going to take this back, and I'm going to, I'll just create a new design. Okay, and I am going to create a sketch. This is my brand new design. Create a sketch, and I'll create a sketch on this face, but you'll see I will even create another offset plane, because let's say I want to create some sort of lofted part. I'm going to show you what that means. There's a tool here called Loft under the Create menu, and I'm going to show you how important that is. Okay, so I'm going to create a sketch here. Okay, and I will create a rectangle here. Okay, so I'll do it 20 by 30. Press enter. Okay, and okay, so there's my original sketch here. Okay. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an offset plane. So watch this. So offset plane. Okay. I'm going to create an offset plane from this plane here. Okay. So from where I drew this rectangle, I'm going to create an offset plane. So I'm going to click here. And now I'm going to choose the distance that I want to do it. Now I can drag this up and create a plane. See how it's dragging that plane up? Did you see that? Okay. See that? See where it's moving that plane? So let's say I move that plane 15 millimeters up. Okay. Now watch this. When I go to create a new sketch, okay, create a new sketch, instead of choosing these planes or this face, I'm going to choose this other plane that got moved up from this bottom plane up 15 millimeters. I'm going to click on it. Okay, and now I'm going to create, instead of a rectangle, I'm just going to create a random circle here that looks to be about 50 millimeters in diameter. Okay, now I can give it some dimensions here and say that the center point from this axis should be 10 millimeters, and the center point to this axis should be 15. Okay, now you can see my circle has gone black. Now, if I click on the home button, you can see, and I orbit, I created a rectangle on the bottom, and I offset the plane up 15 millimeters and created this circle. So now what happens is if I go to create, and I go to this tool called Loft, okay, I can now choose to loft. So go from a rectangular shape and then select your circle. So a rectangular to a circular shape. And look what happens. This is what the loft tool does. It connects two different shapes on different planes, and it blends them in together. Okay, sorry, I need to hit OK here. All right, and it blends them in together. So I go from a rectangular shape to a circular shape, and that was by using the offset plane tool and then drawing a rectangle and then offset the plane, drawing the circle, and then going to create a loft. Okay, so that's another powerful feature in Fusion 360. So to quickly recap what we did, I showed you that you can create a sketch on a face. You can also create a sketch on a mid-plane. If I create a mid-plane, I can create a sketch on an angle if I create a plane at an angle, and I can choose what angle to do it at. And I created a sketch on an offset plane. And then to show you how useful it is, I created a loft to connect those two 2D shapes that I had drawn. Okay? That will conclude this video. I'm going to do one more video before we get to the fidget spinner. I'm going to do just like a very basic part I'm going to draw up for you, and I'm going to want you guys to draw the identical part just to get some practice yourselves. Okay?